Good afternoon, everyone. It is Sunday afternoon, the 17th of May 2020, and I thought I would just show you this for those of you interested in camera gear and that sort of thing. And I went on a photographic trip 6 days ago out to the Caddo Lake area, and I took my new Olympus E-M1 Mk3 as well as my Nikon D810, as well as the Nikon Z6 and my E-M1 Mk2. But one of the main things I wanted to try was the handheld high-res mode of the Olympus E-M1 Mk3, which is available on the E-M1X, but not on the E-M1 Mk2 that I've had for a couple of years now. So after doing a bit of shooting, I found this spot, and I decided to try try a handheld high-res shot here and compare it with what I would get from the same location, shooting as close to the same focal length and aperture and ISO and so on with my Nikon D810. And living here in the US, I never know whether to say Nikon or Nikon. Where I grew up, we say Nikon, but I've been here so long, sometimes I get mixed up and say Nikon. So anyhow, this is the handheld high-res shot with my E-M1 Mk3, and if I zoom in on it, the level of detail is pretty stunning. Now the camera itself is a 20 megapixel 4/3 camera, but when you do handheld high-res, you can shoot a 50 megapixel image, and the Nikon D810 is a 36 megapixel image. Plus, if I put the E-M1 Mk3 on a tripod and change to tripod mode, then I can shoot an 80 megapixel image on a tripod with this camera. So it's pretty stunning what you can do. So that is my 4/3 Olympus E-M1 Mk3, and this is my full frame Nikon D810. I tried to process these both as closely as possible, using the same amount of sharpening and masking on the sharpening and so on, to try and get them to look as similar as possible. And I shot as close as possible to the same location. I basically used one camera, took the photograph, swapped cameras, took the other photograph. As you can see at top left there, the Olympus high-res image is 8160 by 6120 pixels, and the Nikon image is 7360 by 4912. So if we want to compare both together, in Lightroom I can select both and look at them like this. You can see the 4/3 sensor actually gives you a bigger image and a better proportioned image for printing, whereas the full frame sensor, the size of a 35mm slide, is often a pain for photographic printing because you have to crop off the edges. Now if we zoom in on both of this, I tried to focus on these little stumps in the edge of the tree here, and that's what I was attempting to do with both cameras. So I may or may not have gotten it exactly, but if we click to zoom in here at 100%, there is the Olympus image at left and the D810 image at right. At 100%, because the Olympus now actually creates an image with 50 megapixels versus 36 on the D810, you actually see more detail, which is pretty astounding. And if I move up the trunk, say to there, again you can see there's the D810 with these little bits of moss growing on the edge of that trunk. Again, remember, we're in at 100% here, and on the E-M1 Mk3 at left, it actually appears to be a little more distinct, and it got slightly better. It handled the contrast a little better too. If you look at the way the trunk is a bit burnt out there on the right on the Nikon, and on the left on my Olympus, it actually handled that a little better. So that, that may have been just my settings and me taking the photograph, but still I'm very happy with that. And as we go up the trunk, those leaves behind there, the leaves behind there in the D810, it looks like my focus on the D810 was a little bit behind the trunk and not on the trunk as I was trying to do. But either way, it's very impressive to see what this E-M1 Mk3 is able to do now. If we zoom in, let's say, look at this area. Now the D810 was focused a little further back and has a much shallower depth of field at the same aperture than a 4/3 lens on my 4/3 camera with the equivalent sort of field of view. So you can see here at left, the E-M1 Mk3 is sharper and gets better texture on these weeds or whatever they were that grow on top of the water in parts of Caddo Lake. Check out the detail on that versus my D810 on the right. Again, the D810, I think by accident I focused a little further back than I did with my E-M1 Mk3. So I'll test this a little further when I have a chance, but overall very, very impressive what this E-M1 Mk3 is able to achieve. Absolutely stunning amount of detail versus, say, the D810, and the D810 certainly doesn't blow the E-M1 Mk3 out of the water at all. And what I've gotten with my E-M1 Mk3, like there's the trunk there, and there's the similar view in the D810. The E-M1 Mk3, I would say, is absolutely stunning. And this is only a 50 megapixel image. If I put it on a tripod, okay, you of course have the disadvantage of having to use a tripod, but then you would get an 80 megapixel image. So if you wanted to see a little bit of the E-M1 Mk3 with handheld high res, there's the Mk3, there's the Nikon, and I am very impressed.